Hello and welcome to Historia Romana. Episode 4. The Divine Twins. By the death of Procas Silvius in 794 BC, the Latins had solidified their place in west-central Italy, but otherwise had no remarkable events which would indicate future greatness. That pattern would begin to change, however, with the elevation of his son Numitor as king of Alba Longa. Numitor was the elder son of Procas, but it seems the younger son Amulius had no respect for his father's will or his brother's seniority. Around 776 BC, Numitor was overthrown in a coup led by his brother while the king was out of the city. Though he was allowed to live and keep his rural estates because of his popularity with the Alban people, he was still banished from the city itself. Not being one for decency or the rule of law, Amulius soon purged Numitor's young sons Aegestus and Lausus to remove potential claimants to the throne, claiming that they were killed by brigands. For good measure, he had Numitor's daughter, Rhea Silvia, become a priestess for Vesta, the goddess of the hearth and family. Known popularly as Vestal virgins, they were forbidden from marrying or having children. And so Amulius believed that all dynastic threats to his power had been removed. However, it was not to be so simple. One night, Rhea received a vision of her ancestor Aeneas, who warned her that she would soon get a visit from the war god Mars, but that she ought not be afraid. As Plutarch tells us, in June 772 BC, she went to a grove sacred to Mars to get water for use in the Vestal temple, where she encountered a man claiming to be Mars who attempted to rape her. She ran into a cave to escape him, but to no avail. After the deed was done, Mars promised that her future children would become legendary before disappearing. Rhea initially tried to hide her condition with claims of illness so as to avoid her Vestal duties, but Amulius, being the paranoid ruler he was, quickly became suspicious and employed physicians to monitor her for signs of pregnancy. When he discovered the truth, he placed her under armed guard. Eventually, in March 771 BC, she gave birth to twin boys. It was said that Vesta, to show her displeasure of Rhea breaking her Vestal vows, shook her altar and caused the holy fire in her temple to go out. Furious that she had lied to him, the king initially wanted to burn her at the stake, but his daughter Antho convinced him to take pity on her, and so instead had her thrown into prison. Rhea's ultimate fate is unknown, but it's generally assumed she either died in prison after many years or was eventually released and threw herself into the Tiber out of shame. Still fearful of her children, however, Amulius ordered some of his servants to take the babies to the Tiber River to drown them, as to ensure the deed would not be seen by curious locals. Amulius's servants were evidently not thrilled about having to kill babies. When they arrived at the Tiber and found it flooded, instead of taking them out to the middle of the river and throwing them into the current as instructed, they left the babies floating in a basket on the flooded banks in order to give them a slim chance of survival, while reporting back to the king that they had committed the deed. When the water receded, the boys were left malnourished but alive, left sitting in their basket near the Palatine Hill under a fig tree sacred to Rumina, a minor goddess of birth and infants. Soon after, a she-wolf arrived, and instead of doing what wolves normally do to small, defenseless prey, she brought their basket to a nearby cave and offered the boys her teats to suckle on. Eventually, a local shepherd named Faustulus came upon the scene and took the boys back home with him. He presented the twins to his wife, Acca Larentia, and they decided to adopt them into their family. While the two boys, whom they named Romulus and Remus, were not told of their origins, Faustulus always entertained the idea that they were of royal blood, as he had heard the rumors of Rhea's bastard children around the same time. He decided that they would not be told the truth until opportunity offered or necessity compelled him to do so. While we have precious few details on their early lives, we know that Romulus and Remus would have spent their formative years working to support their large family, which included 11 other boys. Given that Faustulus had found them near the Palatine, it's likely to assume that they lived nearby. Plutarch tells us that the twins received a rudimentary education in Gabii, where they learned to read and use weapons. It seems the boys took a natural liking to combat, as once the twins began to come of age, they spent much of their time fighting off the local brigands, and even began to take the fight to the robbers by counter-raiding their camps. There are two versions of what happened next. According to the more dramatic version from Alias Turbo, the raiders were upset at the repeated theft of their spoils and planned an ambush to teach the twins a lesson. In February 753 BC, the twins were taking part in the festivities of the Februar, hence the name of the month, which required them to run naked through their local village. In the midst of the ritual, Remus was kidnapped and taken prisoner in an ambush by a group of armed men. The more traditional version, popularized by Fabius Pictor, is that the boys were embroiled in a cattle dispute with some local herdsmen, seemingly unrelated to their previous exploits, which still ultimately ended in an ambush, with Remus being captured while Romulus got away. Remus was brought to the kidnappers' camp and presented to the local landowner, who turned out to be none other than the exiled Numitor. The raiders wanted to punish Remus and turn him over to Amulius, but Numitor recognized familial features in Remus's face, and realizing that his daughter's children would be about the same age if they were still alive, began to suspect that Remus and his brother were in fact his grandsons. Some sources even go so far as to imply that Numitor had known their identities the whole time, and had been providing financial aid to Faustulus to help in their upbringing. He decided to not punish Remus, and instead had him write a letter to his brother to inform him of what had transpired. Romulus, meanwhile, was absolutely livid at Remus's kidnapping, and rounded up the toughest herdsmen he could find to help him free his brother before rashly setting out for Numitor's estate. To avoid tragedy, Faustulus intercepted him and revealed the truth about their discovery by the Tiber, and that Numitor was likely their grandfather. Soon after, joined by Remus and Numitor, the three family members hashed things out and began to plan a coup to get their grandfather back on the throne. Dionysius adds that while planning their attack on Alba Longa, Faustulus attempted to enter the city to scope things out, but was caught by the Alban guards. He was brought before Amulius by none other than one of the servants who had taken the boys to the river all those years before, informing the king that Faustulus's twin sons matched the descriptions of the twins he had ordered drowned. Amulius questioned the shepherd, insincerely claiming he meant the twins no harm. Faustulus, trying to protect his adopted sons and escape the king's clutches, claimed he had just been trying to visit Rhea Silvia in prison to return the basket he had found the boys in at the Tiber, and that the twins were currently tending their flocks out in the hills. Amulius then sent Faustulus and some of his soldiers to find both the boys and Numitor, and return all three of them to the city at once. Unfortunately for the king, when the group arrived at Numitor's home, the soldiers betrayed Amulius and revealed that the king was onto them. Deciding that they no longer had time to prepare for a frontal assault on the city, the twins decided to change tactics. They led their two militias towards Alba Longa, Romulus leading the local farmers and Remus leading Numitor's hired hands. Approaching from multiple sides and concealing their weapons, the rebels entered the city's walls and attacked the Alban palace at a prearranged signal. Amulius and his court officials were killed, and the citadel was captured before the Alban guards could offer any resistance. Numitor then arrived in the city, and standing before the crowd of onlookers that had assembled after the commotion at the palace, he explained the true story behind his exile and the extraordinary circumstances of his grandson's birth. Upon the completion of his speech, his two grandsons were the first to swear their allegiance to the restored monarch. Despite Numitor's advanced age, the people shouted unanimous consent that he be king once more and celebrated the death of the hated Amulius. As fantastic as this story of revenge was, however, none of this is why Romulus and Remus are remembered today. Instead, it was what they did next that would cement their names in history, albeit not entirely for good reasons. Thank you for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe. Until next time.